1 year later, the George Pickens trade is no longer some vague move where we have to wait around and wonder what Pittsburgh eventually got back. We know what it became. The Steelers traded George Pickens, the most naturally gifted receiver they had drafted in years, and the main piece coming back eventually turned into Drew Aller. There's still a minor pick swap attached to the deal, but nobody is sitting here grading this trade because Pittsburgh moved up a few spots in a later round. The real conversation is Pickens for Aller, and once you strip everything else away, that is a massive gamble. Dallas received a proven NFL receiver entering his prime, somebody who had already shown he could take over games even while playing inside one of the weakest passing environments in football. Pittsburgh received a quarterback prospect with size, arm talent, and upside, but also a player who has not yet proven anything at the NFL level. That does not mean Aller cannot become good. I believe in his tools. I like the way he carries himself. And I understand why Mike McCarthy wanted a young quarterback he could develop, but right now we are comparing production to projection. Pickens went to Dallas and delivered 93 catches for 1,429 yards and 9 touchdowns, finishing third in the league in receiving yards. That is what happened when he finally entered an offense where the quarterback could consistently find him downfield, and the passing game was treated as more than an inconvenience. Pittsburgh spent years asking this guy to make impossible catches from Mitch Trubisky, Kenny Pickett, and whoever else happened to be under center, all while Matt Canada built an offense that made gaining 20 yards feel like moving a mountain. Then came the Arthur Smith passing attack, which was never going to be the dream setup for a receiver trying to establish himself before his second contract. Steelers fans can criticize Pickens for the penalties, the body language, and the moments where he lost control, because those things happened. But the organization cannot pretend it had nothing to do with how this relationship fell apart. You draft a receiver with that much ability, surround him with unstable quarterback play, give him an offense that consistently limits his opportunities, then act surprised when he starts looking for the exit. Pickens wanted a change, and honestly, why would he not? Another season of being told to block, stay patient, and hope the ball eventually came his way was not helping his career or his value. Pittsburgh did not simply lose an immature player it could no longer tolerate. The Steelers helped create the frustration, failed to repair it, chose DK Metcalf as the receiver they were willing to pay, and then moved Pickens before ever seeing what those two could have looked like together. That is what makes the trade difficult to defend 1 year later. It was not only about talent going out the door, it was about Pittsburgh giving up on a player after putting him in conditions that made success harder than it ever needed to be. And I will be honest, when the trade first happened, I could understand the logic even if I did not love the return. Pickens had become difficult to trust week after week. The contract decision was approaching, and it seemed possible that Pittsburgh was avoiding a much bigger headache. But once the season played out and the third-round pick became Aller, the argument changed. This was not the Steelers turning one volatile receiver into several young starters or using the return to complete another major deal. They turned him into one developmental quarterback and now have to hope that quarterback eventually becomes valuable enough to balance the scale. Dallas got the player and benefited immediately. Pittsburgh is the side asking everyone for patience, and that is the difference when we judge the trade today. The future remains open, but 1 year later, Dallas clearly received the better side of the deal. The part that gets rewritten too easily is the idea that Pickens simply woke up one morning, became a problem, and forced Pittsburgh to trade him. Yes, he wanted out. We do not need to protect him from that reality, and we do not need to pretend every frustration he showed was handled correctly. There were penalties that hurt the team, sideline moments that looked terrible, and stretches where his effort became a fair question. But wanting out of Pittsburgh did not come from nowhere. Look at what his first 3 years actually were. He entered the league with Mitch Trubisky and Kenny Pickett at quarterback, Matt Canada designing the offense, and almost no consistency around him. He was asked to win against starting corners, track inaccurate throws, create explosive plays without rhythm, and then accept the blame whenever his frustration became visible. That is not an excuse for every mistake, but it is context, and context cannot disappear just because the Steelers eventually decided they were tired of dealing with him. Wide receivers understand how quickly careers move. They know the second contract is where years of work become life-changing money, and production is what drives that market. Pickens was approaching the most important season of his professional life, and Pittsburgh was preparing to put him through another low-volume passing attack where the run game would come first, and his weekly involvement could change without warning. Why would any ambitious receiver be excited about that? Why would he look at what happened under Canada, look at the Arthur Smith offense, look at the quarterback uncertainty, and believe another year would suddenly maximize him? Then the Steelers traded for DK Metcalf, immediately gave DK the long-term commitment, and made it clear which receiver was part of their future. That was Pittsburgh's choice. They were allowed to prefer DK, but once they made that decision, the ending with Pickens was practically written. He knew the team was not preparing to pay both of them. The Steelers knew his frustration was not going away, and instead of bringing the two together for one season and giving the offense a legitimate outside receiving duo, they shipped the younger player to Dallas. That is why I say the Steelers forced him out even though Pickens wanted to leave. Both things can be true. He wanted a better situation, but Pittsburgh spent years giving him reasons to want one. The organization created the quarterback mess, hired the offensive coaches, controlled the contract decisions, and ultimately chose to trade him. Pickens did not build the offense that wasted so many of his Sundays. He did not decide that receivers should spend half the game clearing space for an attack that struggled to threaten defenses through the air. Pittsburgh put him in that environment and then used his reaction to the environment as part of the justification for moving him. Again, he has to own the immature behavior. Nobody is saying he was some perfect teammate who never caused trouble. The point is that good organizations do more than identify difficult personalities. They figure out whether their own failures help turn a manageable issue into a broken relationship. Dallas looked at Pickens and saw a player worth taking the risk on. Pittsburgh looked at the same talent and decided relief was more important than maximizing him. 1 year later, Dallas appears to have managed the personality while enjoying the production, and the Steelers are left explaining why moving an elite physical talent for a third-round quarterback was the best outcome they could create. That is the part the easy version of this story misses. Pickens didn't become less talented because Pittsburgh was exhausted by him, and the Steelers didn't become blameless because trading him ended the drama. They solved their discomfort by sending away the player, while Dallas solved the football problem by giving him a passing offense Pittsburgh never gave him. Now the entire trade sits on Drew Aller's shoulders, and that is both unfair to him and completely unavoidable. He did not ask Pittsburgh to trade George Pickens. He did not decide what the return should be, and he should not be judged as a failure simply because the player connected to his draft pick became a star somewhere else. Aller deserves the chance to develop under Mike McCarthy, without every practice throw becoming a referendum on a move made before he arrived. At the same time, the Steelers cannot separate him from the trade when they explain why it was worthwhile. This was the asset they received, this is where they used it, and now his future determines whether Pittsburgh eventually has an argument. If Aller develops into a legitimate starting quarterback, nobody will care that Pickens had the better first season after the deal. A good quarterback is worth more than a great receiver, especially when that quarterback is playing on a rookie contract and gives the franchise stability it has been chasing for years. If McCarthy takes the size, arm talent, and experience Aller already has and turns him into the long-term answer, the Steelers can look back and say they moved a player they were never going to extend for the most important position in football. That is the path to winning this trade, but we cannot grade a transaction today based only on the best thing that might happen 3 years from now. Aller is still a projection. Pickens is already producing at a level Pittsburgh desperately needed. One side received immediate proof, the other received possibility. That makes Dallas the clear winner after 1 year, and saying that does not mean Aller has no future. It means Pittsburgh took on nearly all of the risks. The Cowboys knew Pickens could play. Their question was whether they could manage him and eventually handle the contract. The Steelers are asking whether Aller can become an NFL starter at all, which is a far larger football question. He could become the answer. He could become a dependable backup. He could also become another quarterback Pittsburgh spends 2 or 3 years developing before starting the search again. There is a massive distance between those outcomes, and until he proves where he belongs, the Steelers have not received anything close to the value Dallas already got. That is why my 1 year review is not complicated. Pittsburgh lost the first year of this trade. Dallas got the better player, the better immediate return, and the kind of passing game weapon the Steelers were missing when their offense needed somebody to create a play. Pittsburgh got hope. Hope can eventually become something valuable, but it is not production. And it is not enough to call this trade even. I am rooting for Aller because I want the Steelers to finally develop a quarterback correctly. And McCarthy gives him a better chance than the coaching setup Pittsburgh had for years. But believing in Aller does not require pretending the trade was good. Those are two separate conversations. I can like the prospect, understand the plan, and still say the price was too high. The Steelers traded a receiver who had already survived bad quarterback play and outdated offense after outdated offense, then watched him flourish once he escaped it. If Aller becomes the franchise quarterback, Pittsburgh will have the final word. If he becomes anything less than a legitimate starter, this deal will be remembered as the Steelers giving away a rare talent because they could not fix the situation around him. 1 year later, Dallas has the victory, Pickens has the validation, and Pittsburgh has a lottery ticket carrying far more pressure than any third-round rookie should have to carry. Until then, the honest grade is very simple. Dallas won the deal, Pittsburgh lost the player, and Aller has to become much more than an interesting project to reverse it. The Steelers may eventually be proven right, but today they are not remotely close to it.